Okay, so welcome to episode 54 of Level Up, everybody. 60 minutes of live Q&A where your questions and votes drive the show. Please do use the Slido link that we'll be posting in the chat to vote up the questions that you would most like answered, and of course to add your own as well. Level Up is live on Mondays at 8 and Fridays at 2 p.m. UK time, live streamed to both YouTube and LinkedIn simultaneously. So, you can find out much more about what we do as a business by visiting our website, apmginternational.com. Today, we're going to be talking about improving the outcomes on public-private partnership projects, delivering better value for citizens, delivering the strategy and the vision for governments, and of course, helping commercial partners to win better business. So let's jump straight in. We're going to meet our very experienced panel who are waiting for your questions. We're welcoming back many and also welcoming a new person today. Returning to the panel is Abhaya. Abhaya Agarwal is a partner at EY in India, specializing in infrastructure advisory and PPP finance. Welcome back, Abhaya. Great to see you again.
Thank you, Nick. Hello, everybody. Great to be here. And hopefully I will be able to share my experience across sector from transport to health across the years. So look forward to participating.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And let's move on. We'll also welcoming back Nyananso Ekanem. He's a managing consultant at Weircapacity in Nigeria, whose experience bridges both public and the private sector. Welcome, Nyananso.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here and reaching you from hot Lagos. I look forward to interacting with the panelists and also, responding to your questions. I look forward to interacting further after this. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Andre Kruger is the Chief Operating Officer at PPP Training Online in South Africa. Welcome back, Andre. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you, Nick, and welcome to all online. It's really a privilege to be with you today. I am from PPP Training Online, based in Johannesburg, South Africa. Today, talking from Accra in Ghana. And maybe just one important aspect I want to highlight is that we really try and assist governments to integrate their long-term planning, engineering, finance, from that to decide on projects probably to be procured on a PPP basis. Critical, that integration of the long-term planning. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you very much indeed. Joining for his first appearance today is Sudheendra. Sudheendra Bajpai is Director in the Strategy and Transactions Practice, also from EY in India. He's focusing on logistics and transport infrastructure. Welcome to Level Up, Sudheendra. Brilliant to have you with us today.
Thank you for giving this opportunity. I look forward to sharing my views and also learning from the experience of others. I see many colleagues from all over the world, and I look forward to giving my best.
Okay, perfect. It's exactly what Level Up is all about. We all support each other, learn from each other, and grow and develop our careers alongside each other. Mark Williams is returning again. He is the Public Sector Advisor at CIPFA in the UK. And Mark, I don't know too much about CIPFA, so it would be great for you to fill us in a little bit about what CIPFA do.
Great, thanks, Nick. So delighted to be presenting again. So CIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, is the only accounting body in the world focused solely on public services, with about sort of 14,000 members worldwide. We do obviously a lot around sort of policy and technical standard setting and what have you, but we also have a consulting business, and we provide advice, including on PPPs and PFIs. And we've got a training arm, of course, and we train Treasury's Better Business Case program, which I think is an excellent start point when measuring outcomes on projects. And also we train the World Bank PPP program, both the business case program and the PPP program being APMG products.
All right. Okay. Well, very good. Well, thank you for that. And I didn't know that. So I've learned something new already, that they're the only organisation that focuses exclusively on public sector finance, and that's interesting. Thank you very much indeed, Mark, and welcome back to Level Up. Also, regular contributor, of course, are our question masters. Joining us today from Thames Valley here in the UK is Charlotte Miller. So, Charlotte, welcome back, and please, may we have our first question?
Yes. Welcome to a very wintry Thames Valley here in the UK. We've got a question from Theo Papadoulis. Technically speaking, do we need more capacitated government project teams to interact better with the transaction advisors?
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. Andre, why don't you start us off, please?
Thank you, Nick. Yeah, I think that's an excellent question. The public sector need to be much more prepared to firstly conceptualize potential PPP projects, and then to actively participate initially in the pre-feasibility stage of the project, and then gradually in the full feasibility stage. These projects tend to be much more complex. They require, I would say, additional internal capacities, experience to actually be able to, especially also interact with the transaction advisors. In most governments, the PPP framework will require them, a government institution, to appoint transaction advisors, and many times the transaction advisors tend to take over because the government teams are not that strong. So yes, I think an excellent question, and I would say definitely we need stronger government teams to develop these projects. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely right. Thank you very much indeed. I appreciate that. Thank you, Andre. Let's move to Abhaya, and then we'll hear from Nyananso.
Yeah, I think transaction advisors are good in processes, and they have experience from various projects. But you need somebody to give the nuances of the project, as well as the government systems and the institution, and also you need government to take it forward beyond and before the appointment of transaction advisor. So there has to be continuity. There has to be a kind of give and take and synergy between both. Besides the fact that the government would need to develop capacity on the long-term basis, even to interact with the transaction advisor.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Nyananso.
Yes, apart from the technical skills that government officials need, it's great to understand what transaction advisors do. You also need the project management skills, because you're just going to manage a project throughout the life cycle. You also need skills, you need stakeholder engagement skills. And so, yes, the answer is yes. We need the capacity in government to be effectively interacting with transaction advisors to ensure that project outcomes are achieved, because the government officials are basically the holders of the government objectives on those projects. So they need to have that skills to be able to interact effectively. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Sudheendra?
Yeah, thank you. I believe the government also needs to understand that it is their project ultimately. So ownership is very important. My experience has been that sometimes governments tend to offload the project to the private player. So yes, ownership comes from capacity building. Definitely very important that the counterparts to transaction advisors be fully aware. And simultaneously, it is also the responsibility of the transaction advisors to enhance the capacity of their counterparts. So it's a two-way process, very important. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. My thoughts on it's a great question, by the way, this, because of course public-private partnerships generally run for many years. It takes time. It takes time to develop the concept initially, and it takes time to engage all of the partners, and then it absolutely takes time to deliver it and reap all of those benefits. So therefore, you need a really strong and stable, I would say, government team in order to be able to see the project delivery through to the benefits that were initially outlined. And of course, governments tend to change quite frequently, and that's why having good public servants whose career it is to make sure that they follow through on the initiatives that are set by previous governments are super important. So setting up those systems and processes and project teams is a very, very important part. And there's a whole variety of different ways of doing that in different parts of the world. But I do think the World Bank Guide is a great place to begin, if you're thinking about all of that. So very good. What a brilliant question to start us off. So thank you very much, Theo, for your question. Thank you, panel, as well. And Charlotte, let's move on now and we'll take our next question, please.
Thank you, Nick. We've got another question from Theo. He would like to know, how important is the pre-feasibility or project screening phase for improved project outcomes?
All right, so the pre-feasibility stage, Abhaya, start us off, and then we'll hear from Nyananso next. We can't hear you, Abhaya.
Sorry. So project feasibility is very important because you then know about the technical feasibility, environmental feasibility, etc. before embarking on the project. And if you don't do that and you straight away embark on the project delivery on PPP or selection of the private sector, you may go wrong because you are not really prepared. You don't have many answers. You don't have many approvals, and you may get stuck later. So feasibility, pre-feasibility of a good quality across business plan, environmental, legal, financial is very, very important.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Mark, and then Andre.
So from a UK perspective, obviously we've done thousands of PPPs and the 700 PFIs, which were kicked off, mid-90s, and many of them are starting to come to the end. And I think it's probably fair to say that we did do perhaps some very odd projects as PFIs. So, there was a stage where it was the only game in town, to use the phrase, procuring anything, it seemed. And yeah, more should have been done on pre-feasibility, because PFI is not the answer. PPP is not the answer to every problem. And I'm obviously going to say it's using that business case approach, sort of, is this the right project to do from a sort of socio-economic public value standpoint? But then what is the right delivery mechanism to do it? What's the right commercial financial model to use? And there's various tools. There's the business case guidance, but there's also something about a sort of graph of complexity in terms of, are you looking to buy commodity products? So you're looking to buy for a framework. Is it PPP? And then there's some circumstances where a joint venture might be the way to go. So actually forming an entity together. There's also something about, so one of the advantages of PPP and PFI is you need to be able to understand and measure what you're going to contractualize. If you don't know what you've got and what you're trying to achieve, if you then throw it over the fence and do it as a PPP, pass it over to the private sector, it will not go well. So again, feasibility, part of the benefit of PPPs is you need to be able to measure it yourself before you then pass it out to the market. And if you can't do that, then it shouldn't be progressed.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Andre. And then it does indeed. Yeah, thank you, Mark. Andre, and then Nyananso.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And I fully agree with your wisdom there. And then obviously the UK has had a lot of experience. I think part of the problem is that, especially in the developing world, is that we are so used to input specifications, meaning governments put forward detailed specifications of the asset, the service they want to procure, and now to all of a sudden, and it's all of a sudden in many countries. I'm in Ghana at the moment, and certainly here, even although they have a few PPPs, the thinking is very much still input orientated. So we provide detailed specifications to the private sector, and it's not easy to convert from that thinking to adapt and to think differently about the project. So to my mind, typically we will have a pipeline of projects. Hopefully the pipeline is prioritized. From that, we will identify a few that we may want to procure on a PPP basis, because on face value, they may be the right ones to develop on a PPP basis, or they may not. The feasibility will help us, obviously, to understand that. So yeah, in short, it's very important to conceptualize, to understand the project, and to learn from others, to learn from the UK, to learn from China. I wanted to say, let me not go there. Some other big countries that are making problems for us now. But we can learn from other jurisdictions, other sectors. Quite
Yeah, it's certainly true. In the conferences that I've attended, where even the size of the capital market, the availability of finance, sometimes the bond market, that can affect the frequency and the level of PPP experience that is in a particular geography. So from that perspective, it's really, really important to learn from others and and to build on all of that. Thank you very much indeed, Andre. Really insightful. Nyananso, final thoughts on this, please, my friend, before we move on.
Yes, yes, pre-feasibility is very, very important. Not just saving you the resources you have to spend for appraisal if the project is a no-go for PPP, but also it helps define your outcomes clearly. Because when you're planning projects, you want to be sure that what's the best option to best value. And so if your outcome will be best delivered through public-private partnership, then screening will help you to determine if it's through public-private partnership. If it's through conventional procurement, you want to put it in government budget, screening will help you determine that. And so screening not just saves you, the resources and time invested in appraising projects, procuring projects. It also helps you determine clearly what the project outcome should be and the best way to deliver that outcome. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. And this is the value, I think, in these panel discussions, because the question seems quite straightforward, doesn't it? And you could kind of think to yourself, well, yeah, of course it's important. But I think every answer there has brought to life why is it important, and a slightly different dimension on that, and how to actually enrich that experience and get those projects screened early so that you can invest in the ones which are investable. You can naturally kind of filter out the ones that generally are not. So look, I can see that we've got a strong audience online today. So thank you for joining us, everybody in LinkedIn. Do introduce yourselves in the chat, please, and tell us whereabouts in the world you are from. And of course, you can put a question directly to the panel. Just ask your question in the chat, okay? And one of our colleagues will lift it up from there and bring it into Slido for you. Or if you have a phone handy, point its camera at the little QR code on the screen and it'll jump you straight there. So you can continue to watch on your computer and you can interact with Slido and vote up the questions that you would most like answered by using your phone. It's super easy to do. Really good. Okay, well, Charlotte, let's move on, please, and take our next question.
We have a question from excuse me, I'm sorry, Azizul Quadir. Is political will important to ensure maximum PPP outcome?
Okay, is the political will important, panel? Nyananso?
Yes, very, very interesting question. Thank you very much, Azizul. Okay, so I always say that politics determines policies, and policies determine projects. And so if you don't get the politics right, then you will not get the right project. Because no matter what we do, the public policy objective comes from the political class. And so political will is very critical to ensuring project outcomes. So if a politician decides that his objective or his preferred outcome is to build a road without thinking of a project outcome that should be transportation, then you end up having beautiful roads without transportation system. And so yes, political will is very, very determining project outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Andre, your thoughts?
Yeah, it is as Nyananso said, it is actually very important, and it's important right throughout the project as well. So it's not only during that initial feasibility stages confirming that the project is important. Nick, I think you alluded to the notion that during the life of the project, coming to the handback phase, as we have heard from Mark, government need to keep supporting the project. I mean, it is government that entered into this marriage, if I can use that analogy, and they've got a huge responsibility to see this project towards the end, to a successful handback to government. So yes, political will is important from day one. We've got some successful projects in South Africa that are now reaching the handback phase. Only a handful of them, but nevertheless, all of them have had champions at the start. Very good contract management during the contract itself, and also guiding the process during the handback phase. Thanks, Nick.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, and thank you, panel, for that insight. And it's a brilliant question, Azizul, in asking it. It's like any project, really. I think you need those sponsors. You need that, initial clarity of purpose, and politicians, to Nyananso's point, kind of they set out that vision, don't they, which ultimately turns into policy and projects. And it's that joined up thinking. Joined up thinking always helps a great deal, doesn't it? We've had airports built in Europe way ahead of any passengers being available. There was the political will to do that because there was the funding available, but there wasn't necessarily that joined up thinking. So, infrastructure sometimes goes really well. You're a visionary if you get it right, but if you get it wrong, you're a creator of the proverbial legacy of doom. So it's a tricky thing, I think, for politicians to get right, but nonetheless, anyway. All right, let's move on. We'll take our next question if we can, please, Charlotte.
Nick, we've had a live question come in. It's from Janita from Tasmania. It's so important to keep training government officials. Will the CP3 guide be updated?
Okay, so CP3P is the shorthand for the World Bank guidance. And there's a number of different ways in which the community around PPPs kind of keeps themselves up to date. The first one that I would say is that it's through events like this and connecting with individual consultants and advisors. All of the folks on the panel, you can find their biography and a little link to their LinkedIn profile on apmginternational.com. So just go and search for the Level Up event, and then you'll be able to find them and click through and connect with them. And they'll be able to kind of help you out with some of the more recent developments. The guides themselves do tend to lag behind a little bit, okay? It's normal for that to happen. It's like any standard around the world. You set the standard and then you implement it and then you refresh it and update it. So I'm sure in good time these things will be updated. Panel, do you have any views on that side of things? Mark, what are your thoughts around trying to keep up to date and keep relevant? And then we'll hear from Sudheendra.
So I was involved in developing the CP3P guide. Also, I piloted it for the World Bank in East Africa. I haven't heard that they plan to refresh it. I think there's more of a gradual process. And it's a good question in that I think it probably would benefit from a bit of a refresh, particularly around sort of PPP BFI expiry, which we've now got more experience of. Also, energy efficiency, net zero related projects would probably benefit. But even if the CP3P guidance itself isn't updated, it's knowing where you can make the links that Nick referred to in terms of other local guidance that could be useful, expertise held elsewhere. So even if, for example, they don't add a chapter on sort of PPP expiry beyond what's already in there, there's so much material now gathering pace in the UK now that we're seeing, sort of hundreds of PFIs coming to an end. So, and yeah, it's staying up to date, recognising that there continues to be a churn of public officials. People move on, people join. And, I'm quite passionate about the training side, and you can never do enough in my mind, because there's always lessons to be learned. So,
Thanks. Good, good. Thank you very much. Sudheendra, your thoughts?
Thank you. I believe even as the CP3 guide may be updated or may not be updated, I believe it will be at some point of time. But still, I believe that those are very important stepping stones to understanding the nuances of the PPP, project preparation, delivery, and management. So I take it this way is that at least we have something available with us to begin with. And those guides should be taken in that spirit. They are not a final solution, but they provide you the guidance, and that is the way they should be taken. So updation may happen a little late, but that should not undermine their importance. That is what I would say. Thank you.
Absolutely right. The principles and the practice are all embedded in there, which is a really good thing. And of course, it is a growing community of practice now. Nyananso, what are your thoughts on this? How do you keep up to date?
Okay, so that's from Tanzania, and we've done quite a number of CP3P foundation and preparation levels in Tanzania. And truly, there are sections of the guide that candidates will ask, okay, this needs update, maybe a word or a sentence or something. And truly, the APMG is interacting with all training organizations to provide feedback for update. And so there will definitely be an update to the CP3P guide. That's the PPP guide. However, that has to come as a comprehensive exercise. And so right now we are feeding into the update process, and over time the document will be updated. But truly, yes, it will require an update at some point. But as it is right now, it's a very good foundational document for you to understand how to apply PPPs. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Janita, for the question. It's a great question. And it's a constant challenge, isn't it, for professionals to know, as soon as you've qualified, the world is moving on all of the time, and we need to keep ourselves up to date with, the most recent good practice and so on. So very good. Thank you very much. Charlotte, let's move on. We'll take our next question, please.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Amwee. They would like to know, why are there more PPP failures than successes?
Well, that's quite an interesting question, isn't it? I guess let's hear from Andre. Abhaya is going to start us off. I do apologise, Abhaya. I was looking at you and I couldn't quite kind of get your name out of my mouth. Let's start with Abhaya and then we'll move on. We'll hear from Nyananso and then Mark.
Yeah, I think it's an important and interesting question. First of all, we see failures more than the successes because they tend to attract more eyeballs. But most of the PPP failures are because of poor preparation or wrong selection of projects. So, but they give a lot of bad names to overall PPPs because people then identify these failures with PPP per se rather than some part of feature of it. But it is not true that there are more PPP failures than successes. And I think statistics will support, and there are a lot of experts here. If they have ready access to some statistics, maybe they can corroborate this. I think there are more successes than failure.
Right. Thank you very much indeed. So let's go next to Nyananso, please, and then Mark.
Yeah, just to follow up with Abhaya's comments. So first, I would have asked, okay, what's the source of your data? Right, there are more failures than success. But also from our experience implementing projects, we've seen quite a number of projects that are called PPPs and end up, failing, but they are not PPPs. So, truth be told, let's be sure that the projects that are failing are really PPP projects that have failed, not just concepts. Project concepts that did not go through, and you call them PPP projects and they fail, and so the PPP is failing. So let's differentiate that from real PPPs that are south, and differentiate it from projects that you've planned and have not come to fruition. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Mark, please.
And I suppose, like the other two panelists, I'd sort of question the data in terms of more failures than successes. Certainly in the UK, the National Audit Office, they've written some critical reports on some of our 700 PFI deals, but they, on balance, remain positive. And I mean, I explained, I think, earlier that I see you do the business case in terms of, is this the right program or project? You then decide what sort of commercial financial mechanism you're going to use. And PPP obviously is one of the tools open to you. So is the failure because it was the wrong project, or is the failure because of the choice of PPP? It's also worth thinking about the counterfactual. There's plenty of traditionally procured government projects that have failed. So where they haven't used PPPs, there's a reason why the model was introduced. Government wasn't necessarily very good at doing these projects themselves. There's a lot I could say on this. One of the other thoughts was, I tend to say is, value for money from a PPP, from a 25-year project, does not come on the day that you sign the contract. Value for money from a 25-year contract comes across 25 years of actively contract managing said project. So, you'll only achieve the outcomes if you actively contract manage it as well. So, there's a few thoughts.
Thank you very much indeed. Sudheendra?
In addition, I would like to add is that the interest in PPPs is not going down, at least in the developing world. And if the concept or the idea was flawed and there were more failures than successes, then I believe that the interest in the concept would be going down. In the developing world, especially in India, more and more projects are being contemplated, are being taken up through PPP. So, despite irrespective of, we do not have statistics, I believe there are more successes than failures.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. One thing that I would kind of advise people on here at this point is something called association bias. Okay, now this can have we've all had experience of a friend buys a particular car. I don't know, maybe it's red or something like that. And then suddenly, as you're out and about, you probably see an awful lot of that model in that color. And it's just because we tend to associate one thought with another. And of course, governments generally do get reported in the press on a regular basis. So the press kind of like to highlight things that don't quite go to plan a little bit more than they perhaps might highlight the things that succeed. So do bear that in mind a little bit. It's often our own association bias which kind of builds up this picture, in our minds. And going back to the facts, going back to offices for audit and this kind of thing are actually a super useful way to be able to benchmark and say, let's see the wood for the trees and get a fair and balanced picture. Very good. Thank you very much, panel. And thank you to Amway for raising the question. Let's move on, Charlotte, please. We'll take our next question if we can.
You can, Nick. We've got a question from McClayton. What kind of negative impact does a failed PPP outcome have to government and to the private sector?
All right. So what are the consequences of trying something and it going a little bit pear-shaped? Abhaya?
Yeah, I think one thing which I mentioned is that PPP itself gets a wrong name. A failed outcome is not because of PPP. A failed outcome is because the project was not selected. The outcomes were not defined earlier and they were not measured, or the private sector has failed to deliver it. Private sector has, of course, in most of the country, including India, much more at stake in their reputation, and also because government tends to blacklist them very fast. But one failed project of PPP actually creates problem for many PPP projects which are in the offing. So that's why I think all the panelists also, they have been cautioning that preparation of project is very important. But if, as Mark said, the traditional project also fail to deliver, and if one or two projects, because of some reason, fail deliver, let it be. Some of the toll road also that they were highly successful, more successful because on a toll road there was a huge congestion, and people started blaming it that's a failure. But it's about of many other urban development which took place because of which the traffic was exploded.
Right, understand. Thank you very much indeed. Nyananso and then Mark.
Okay, so first is to agree on what PPP outcomes should be, and in government, what should PPP outcomes be? For a government, it should be improvement in services or acts. For instance, you have a PPP project in health, your outcomes should improvement in health, not about number of hospitals you have or the equipment you have. It's about improvement in health. If you have PPP in transportation, it should be improvement in transportation services. And so if you don't achieve those outcomes for a government, you're declining on those human development indices that should actually be the outcome of your government. And so if you have a strategic objective to say that I improve healthcare, I want to improve education, I want to improve water supply, you are assessed against the outcome, not the asset you've built. And so for a government, if you're forming and your PPP projects are not achieving the expected outcomes, they're forming government, and so that will affect you politically as well. And so for the private sector, same thing. But for us, I think defining the outcomes for the private sector is also very important. That way they can incorporate that into the contract and they can achieve the project outcomes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Mark, your thoughts?
See, I think it's important to highlight what type of failure do we mean, and failure for who. So failing to achieve the socioeconomic benefits and outcomes obviously is not great. But in the UK, we've seen quite a few where basically there's been a commercial failure or a project management failure. So private sector, for example, have fallen over, gone out of business, and that's not great for public sector, but arguably it's worse for the private sector in those circumstances. So a failure of the private sector there. I mean, I still believe that we need to use these types of commercial and financial models, especially for things like renewables and net zero and climate adaptation projects. But the trick is, I think, to develop a program of projects and hopefully find a way of educating such that people understand that with those types of agendas, you're going to need to try some things and not all of them will work. As long as you learn the lessons from things that don't go well, and as long as it's in a controlled environment, then hopefully you can move forward. So that programmatic approach, doing a pipeline of projects, for me, is so important in terms of mitigating the impact of failures, because not everything's going to go perfect.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. It's about building up that competency, really, isn't it? And the more that you do, the better that you can get if you set your mind on it, and if you take it, seriously. Andre, you've been waiting for a wee while to contribute. What are your thoughts on this?
The comment made by Mark on learnings, absolutely spot on. So maybe the first brief comment, is that from a ratings agency perspective, the project risks related to PPPs are better than traditional government procured projects. So from a banker's perspective, the PPPs provide, in general, a better outcome. But for those projects that fail, obviously, that's the ideal situation to learn from. It's few and far between. If I take a specific country, you will find that out of 10 projects, if one fails, it is actually quite a lot. And then again, people, especially when you're new into PPPs in a specific country, you are very deliberately diligent, making sure the project will not be the one that fails. and sometimes governments could be sort of over eager and trying to protect. But anyhow, so the key message I would support is we should learn from it and improve the next project. Thanks.
Yeah, completely agree with all of that. And, I would say, step up those efforts on communicating what benefits are being derived. It's very rare for, projects to kind of stall or fail entirely. There's often a huge range of benefits which are actually delivered as part of these kinds of works, and they span over many, many years. So, being clear about all of that and communicating and engaging with that stakeholder community, particularly if the stakeholder community are citizens, is an ongoing piece of work that needs to be done. Very good. Thank you very much indeed, panel. Let's move on, Charlotte. If we can, we'll take our next question.
Of course, Nick. We've got a question from Bethany in Manchester, UK. Would receiving formal PPP training and certification help to improve PPP outcomes?
Okay, all right. Well, I may send Bethany an Easter egg, actually. That's the kind of question that I think our panel will feel very firmly about. Abhaya, start us off, and then we'll hear from Andre.
Yeah, I will give a brief answer. So I was a PPP practitioner before doing this formal certification. I think it's about knowing and putting that into method and science, which helps you structure it, use it much better over a period of time in a repeated manner. So yes, it helps because then it gets formalized, it gets built into your system and mainstream.
Thank you very much, Andre. And then Nyananso.
Yeah. So let me start with this. So PPP training on its own will not help us to deliver better, to design better outcomes in a PPP project. It's obviously need to be augmented with practical experience. So I'm following my colleague's lead earlier on. We need, it's like any training, any capacity building. But certainly then receiving PPP, formal PPP training, going through this full course, the certified PPP professional courses, will help a lot. But that in itself could not be the end game. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Nyananso, your thoughts?
Yeah, same as Abhaya. I mean, I was involved in PPP projects even before being introduced to the PPP training. And so the difference was very clear because, as a practitioner then, we're relying on project management skills, delivering projects, but understanding, the depth and the processes for PPPs, but also understanding structuring contracts to achieve desired outcomes. Very important. So learning, the structured way of delivering PPPs is quite important through PPP training. And so that will be an added value to anyone that is a practitioner. So yes, absolutely yes. PPP training will be very helpful to achieve PPP outcomes.
All right, thank you very much indeed. And it's a great question. So thank you very much indeed for raising that. And a good combination there, isn't it? I think, if you're early career and mid-career, then, taking training courses and receiving certifications, they help you. They're a passport really to you securing a role in a discipline that perhaps you've not had that much exposure to previously. And as everybody has said, you need to be able to balance up those government teams and the commercial teams if you're going to partnership and get the best out of that whole partnership arrangement. So it's an ideal opportunity. And I think we now have tens of thousands of people who have taken the CP3P qualification around the world. So you're joining a very, very strong community indeed by using that to solidify your thinking and your career. So very good. Thank you very much indeed. We're running out of time now, but we will take a couple more questions, I think. Let's see what we can do with the next one, please, panel. Charlotte, do we have the next question?
Yes, we've got a question from W. Nelson Edwards. Are tools such as the World Bank PSAT consistent with best practice project identification and screening for PPP?
Okay, Andre, your thoughts, please.
So, practical example, sitting in a country now, considering PPPs, let's say in a specific entity, let's use the Ghana Water Company. We haven't spoken to them, so I'm just using them as it would be very important for them when they use their pipeline of projects. Let's say they've got 10 projects, all of them large projects to consider. when they consider those projects and potentially consider how to procure the projects, either a traditional or a PPP procurement methodology, they need in the back of their minds to understand the fiscal exposures that will be created by the procurement methodology. So from that perspective, the World Bank has got a very good model where they help developing countries to monitor the fiscal exposures. That's what Mr. Edwards is referring to here. So I would argue that, yes, it's important to consider the fiscal exposures of whatever you're going to do as a large public sector entity or government department. Very, very important. The procurement route will definitely play a role. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Abhaya, your thoughts on this?
I think some form of identification and screening happens in various countries, but it's not structured. It's not again same across, and you may miss some parameter. You may, and also for allocation, capital allocation, or PPP project prioritization, etc. It's very important that there are consistent parameters on which you are evaluating. It's a great tool, but I will caution that very few people know about it. They were not trained on it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. It's a really good question, and thank you very much to W. Nelson for raising it. So, Charlotte, I think we've probably got time for one more question to the panel. So let's take that, please.
Thanks, Nick. We've got a question from Colleen Cara. When are PPPs a good fit, and when not to use PPPs?
Wow, okay. I think this is probably the title for a book or a symposium or a week's worth of learning. So we're going to walk around the panel, I think, with this one. So give us your thoughts, please, on either of those two scenarios, where you think it's a really good fit and where in your experience perhaps people should think very carefully. Abhaya, we'll start with you and then we'll go to Mark.
Okay, so the first part, when PPPs it should be reasonable size. Don't waste too much of time size project. There should be enough private sector interest. There should be enough private sector player who dabble in that part of sector and project. Then your regulatory and finance structure should be very clear. You should be able to make raise money, etc. When PPPs are, if suppose there is not enough interest from private sector because risks are too high, and it is very important to allocate risk at a reasonable cost, I think it's better to avoid it than go for the government.
Thank you very much. Mark and then Andre.
So I think I talked earlier about sort of graph of complexity, the idea depending on the benefits, costs and risks, the complexity of what you're looking to do. There's different degrees of partnering and different commercial models to use. So, buying stationery, you wouldn't use a PPP, you use a commodity contract. But if you're trying to buy social care outcomes, it's a PPP. So having that mindset around, there's a range of commercial and financial models that are open to you, and using the right one for the project you want to do, very useful. Other principles, there's a principle in the business case guidance that you should have the risk held by the party best able to manage it. So PPPs work where the private sector can genuinely take risk. Obviously, innovation is very important. If there's opportunities for the private sector to bring innovation genuinely, having a sort of outcome-based or output-based contract makes sense. Where you need the due diligence that the private sector brings, part of the reason why these contracts take a long time to form at the start is because a huge amount of work goes on due diligence, because you're trying to get a contract in place for 25 years. So where that's useful, also where it's useful to have those multi-parties on the private sector side holding the special purpose vehicle or the partner to account as you go along through. There's something about gluing together the design, the build, the finance, the operate, maintain. Got lots of experience in the UK where we have one person design it, somebody else builds it, and then someone else tries to maintain it. and that does not work well. There's lots of case studies as to why that's been a problem. So gluing together those things. So there's sort of half a dozen principles there in terms of where PPPs work well, but equally, if any of those are untrue, then a PPP may be overcomplicated for what you're looking to achieve.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark, and then Andre.
Yeah, so I think that's been well said. A great summary. So let me. I think you ended up by saying that there's some projects are not fit. So thinking loudly, maybe a public sector bus operation, a 20-kilometer bus route in Tanzania, on its own, probably not a good idea to try and develop a PPP around that. But maybe if that bus service is for 50 kilometers, and you can add a few other bus routes, and you can create a bigger or a group project, as we speak in PPP language. You can either group schools, you can group buses. Maybe there's something in there. And then again, speaking about Tanzania, you may know that there's another international consulting firm that have done some work in Tanzania especially on smaller PPPs, where they have then considered grouping bus public transport type transactions, maybe fresh produce markets, some of those. So on their own, probably not fit for purpose, but to procure through a PPP. But maybe if you group them, I'm saying maybe, because they may still be tough to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Some good thinking there. Sudheendra, your final thoughts on this, please.
Yeah, thank you. As we see, there are two parties. One is the public sector and the other is the private sector. Now, while the public sector is focused towards providing facilities and services for the public, we must always keep in mind that at the end of the day, the private sector is for profit. Private sector is not for charity. So if we feel that despite all combinations of project structuring, if the private sector is not going to be able to realize profit at the end of the day, and it may be large profit, it may be small profit, but if the private sector does not find it viable, at some point of time, it may back out and there will be failure. So assessing the commercial aspects of PPP projects from the private sector perspective is as assessing the benefits from the public perspective. That is all that I would want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Some great insight there. Nyananso, final thoughts?
Okay, so this is actually a topic in the PPP guide. And so if you're doing a CP, you will spend some time discussing this, what should be PPP and what should not be. But in summary, if a government defines strategic objectives and you sit down to identify projects that would help achieve that objective, now your screening process will help you define which one is best fit for PPP and which one should be done through conventional procurement. And that way you can determine what route you use to achieve the project outcomes you need to help you achieve the strategic objective. So in summary, project screening will help you determine what is best fit for PPP and which one not to use PPPs for. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you so much to our producers who've been online with us today. And of course, they are the folks who put in the questions. And you can do that at any time for any level up episode before or during the event, as you've seen. So thank you very much for some great questions and also for some great answers, of course, from our panel today. So let's just walk around the panel and hear their final thoughts on today's event. Mark, if I may, I'll come to you first and then Abhaya.
Of course. No, it's been really interesting sort of 55 minutes. We've obviously covered a lot of ground, and clearly I've been very pleased to hear, the stress on sort of capacity and capability building and sharing best practice, because obviously I'm biased, but I do genuinely think the CP3P program, as well as the business case program, which I think goes hand in hand, both of which have had, over 10,000 people go through them now, are really powerful frameworks to, train people up in the principles so that they know, I'm going to say, enough to know where to go from there, so they feel confident in progressing these complex arrangements. So, yeah, pleased with the discussion around capacity and capability building.
Great. Thank you very much indeed, Mark. Abhaya and then Andre.
I think we should understand why PPPs are important on a more macro basis, because one of the foundation of balanced growth for any country is private sector investment. Pure government investment will not be sustainable. So we have to find ways and means to structure and find private sector who can efficiently execute them. And to do that, you need to build capacity. To do that, you need to have pipe. To do that, you need to have proper structures, framework, regulation. So all the questions today, I think, asked, they were kind of pointing one to another one, which was great.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Andre and then Nyananso.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. So to my mind, it comes back to we need, and I think Mark mentioned it in relation to the UK, we need to improve the screening phase, that initial consideration of potentially procuring this project as a PPP or not. We need to do better integration around financial and engineering planning. All of that, I think, doing that better will help us to get to better outcomes well, firstly, to identify outcomes that government would want to have, and then also obviously the bigger outcomes of the project as a whole towards the end of the period. So it was a great session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Andre. Nyananso and then Sudheendra.
So, first is the topic, very, very interesting topic, because I think that achieving project outcomes are very, very critical. It's easy to achieve project outputs. You can actually build a rail system or, build a hospital or a water supply system. But are this project achieving expected outcomes? That means for a hospital, are you improving healthcare? And for a school, are you improving education? And so it was a very interesting topic to be part of. But also the questions helped a lot, because we interacted, we've learned a lot as well. And so we look forward to the next sessions with you. Thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much indeed, Nyananso. Sudheendra, your thoughts, please.
Thank you. I believe participation by both the public sector as well as the private sector for infrastructure development is important. The government as such cannot carry the responsibility of doing everything on its own, neither does it have the capacity. So PPPs are important frameworks for infrastructure development, and they, with the right approach, success is going to happen. Definitely everything cannot succeed. There may be some failures, but that should not mean that the paradigm as a whole is ineffective. PPP is an effective paradigm, and we should continue. This was my first participation. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Sudheendra, and great job. Charlotte, your thoughts, please, on today's event.
Thank you, Nick. I just wanted to say a big thank you to all of our panel. Thank you very much for your time and your contribution and your expertise that have been shared with everybody. And thank you to our audience, because without them, we would not have the question to submit to our panel. We've got many more questions that we could ask on public-private partnerships, and I'm sure that we need to do another live show on this theme as soon as possible.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed, Charlotte. Great job in navigating your way through all of the questions as they were coming in, and also to the team online. Thank you for your help in translating some of the questions into a shorter format so that we could fit them into the show. So that was really great job. Very well done. I'd like to thank everybody, of course, for adding your questions in and voting up the ones that you most wanted us to spend time on. Over on our website, you can now search for and view the answers to over 750 questions that have built up on Level Up, and things like our midday mentors programs and a day in the life of different roles and responsibilities and so on. Just visit apmg-international.com/level up. It's an amazing free resource to connect you with over 100 experts now from around the world. So don't forget as well that you can listen to the audio versions of the shows on your preferred podcast platform. Now, coming up then on Level Up on Monday, it's all about exam preparation techniques, something as adults that we tend to forget over time. So it's a great thing to be able to jump straight back into. We're going to explore preparing for Agile project management certifications. And we've got a panel of very experienced trainers who do this stuff for a living. So it's definitely worthwhile tuning in for that. At this time next Friday, we're going to be looking at the top 10 ways to improve your online teaching. So whether you're a teacher, a trainer, or indeed somebody that's trying to learn online, it's a brilliant event to tune in for. Subscribe to the show, and of course, we'll send you a personal summary of what's coming up and how you can join us here on the panel and level up your career with APMG. So thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you next time.